You can. So welcome, everybody. Tonight's book is Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmus. A little bit about our author. I always like to start with too, and I have that in here. Let me share that with you. She is a copywriter and creative director who has worked widely in the fields of technology, medicine, and education. She's an open water swimmer, a rower, no surprise there, and mother to two pretty amazing daughters, born in California and most recently from Seattle. She currently lives in London with her husband and her dog. Guess what her dog's name is? 99. Guess why the dog is named 99? Anyone? Additional icebreaker. Why would you name your dog 99? Who's got it? No one. I'll tell you. It's a reference to Get Smart. It's an old,
I was gonna say Get
yes.
Smart.
It's an old TV show, maybe before all of our times. I don't know. So
No, not
anyway.
before mine.
Okay, well, she definitely likes numbers for her dog's names, as we see from 630 and now 99. I thought a fun icebreaker for tonight, if you don't know what else to say or you're warming up a little bit, you could tell us who your chemistry teacher was in high school, or maybe a chemistry professor you had in college if you went on to study more chemistry, and give that teacher or professor a shout out. I'll start. I remember Dr. Larson in high school. He was very intimidating. He sort of resembled Santa Claus, and he whistled a lot when he spoke, maybe not intentionally, but there was definitely a kind of to his cadence. And he was tough, and I did not do well in chemistry, and that was a tough class for me. But I can say I've now proudly co-raising a son who is taking chemistry and getting an A in it in college. So humble brag, parent brag, if I may, for a second. So he didn't get it from me, but at least he's getting chemistry better than I did. But as Semisonic once saying, it's all about chemistry. So hopefully we have some good chemistry tonight as we discuss this book and make some friends and strengthen some relationships. Who wants to kick it off by telling us what they thought? Is this book worth the hype? This is probably one of the most popular books of the last year. It's gotten incredible reviews. It's incredibly top-selling book. There is an Apple TV Plus series coming out in a few months starring Brie Larson as the titular, or as the main character. So yeah, as Zot. Should be interesting. What'd you guys think of it? Who wants to start? Talk to me. Let me see one of those hands. Anyone? Otherwise, I just keep talking. I can talk. Okay. I'll wait until I see a virtual hand.
I can't find the virtual hand.
You can't find a virtual hand? Then Cindy, you know what? Jump in.
I'll just do this.
Yes. How you doing?
Well, I listened to the audiobook, and so I really enjoyed it, and I think I would really enjoy it as a video series, just because I found with the audio, I did it while I was walking of the dog quite a bit. And so I can just sort of picture, like, where was I when this happened or when this was revealed? So I enjoyed that a lot. I really liked the character, and I wanted to visualize her more and see it in action.
Cindy, you do it much the same way that my wife and I do it, and that is listening while walking the dog. It is a great way to do it. We each have one of these in an ear. And we oftentimes have to pause because we run into someone on the street or neighbor and they want to talk to you, and we're like, hold on. Like,
yeah.
And then I got to rewind, and it's like, don't you? And now people are to the point where they're like, what book are you listening to? They just like, that's all they want to ask us. Like, what's the next book? Obviously they just know we walk around listening to books in this neighborhood. So yes, it's a good audiobook, very, very well read. And it did bring it to life. But yeah, I too am excited to see how they bring it to life. And my number one question is how they address the 630 internal monologue and how smart the dog character will be. Because in my research for this, one of the interesting things I found out was how much Bonnie Garmus herself had to fight for getting that 630 character the way it is on the page, and her editor was like, this is too much, kind of like, cut this, you're getting silly now, and she said she didn't want to cross over into what is considered magical realism, but she has a long history of being close to animals and having good dogs in her family. And she did want to in some way convey that they do have feelings, they do think, and they might not know, what is it, by the end there's 700-800 words or plus that.
Yeah.
I don't even remember the final count, but she said that one of the things it was inspired by was she would be surprised often at what words her dog 99 and the one before it actually did pick up and could relate to and could react to. So it's interesting. Your mileage may vary. I'm a dog person also. So I thought it was cool, but like it did throw us for a while because it comes a bit later in the book, and then all of a sudden now we're like, oh, we're in the dog's head, and this is seriously like, and there. So does anyone have, and I'm especially interested to find this out, I found out that there's a Barnes and Noble special edition that has an additional chapter that is completely a 630 chapter that was cut from the book, but that it is often quoted online and people talk about it as some of their favorite stuff in the book. And it's not actually in the main book. It's just an additional chapter that you could only get through a Barnes and Noble special edition. No free ads for them. But they got the extra chapter. I didn't get to read it yet. I'm actually interested in probably try to read that chapter. I'd love to hear anyone who has. But I see Evelyn has her hand up. So Evelyn, let's go to you.
Hi, I really did enjoy this book. I just loved the voices of the characters and just how it was narrated. I really I was trying to think like, who does this remind me of? Because I've never read anything else that this author wrote. And to me, it struck this balance between Maria Semple, from Where'd You Go, Bernadette, and J.R. Straddle or whoever wrote the Lager Queen of Minnesota.
Yeah.
I just those were kind of the two that it really reminded me of. And it was just a very enjoyable book. Loved the dog. I loved the relationship between Calvin and Elizabeth. But despite all of that, I just had a great time. I enjoyed the ride. I do not think this is it warrants all the stars it has in Goodreads, all the publicity it gets. It's very easy. It was very easy and to digest. And that's great. And I loved it. But yeah.
Yeah, I would say also, yeah, it's easy to digest. There certainly are some, there are a few chapters that hit pretty hard. And I think obviously she is the victim of a sexual assault, an attempted rape. And that's a pretty dark, hard chapter. Fortunately, the character comes out okay from it. And it doesn't really, maybe the book doesn't dwell on the trauma that much, but there are some things in there that maybe with the distance of saying, well, this was the 60s, we can say but I think what it's also asking us is how different are things now, right? In 2023 versus the 60s. And I'd be interested to hear from especially women here, what their thoughts are on what they've experienced and, in more current times, or if you can take a look at this now and say, thankfully, things are better. Maybe a little both. I don't know. Donna, talk to us.
Well, I'll just say that the last time I read a book that was really, really hyped was All the Light You Cannot See. And it, was huge bestseller, 1,000 people on the wait list at the library. And I went to it with trepidation into reading that because I thought, oh, I read so many things. Can this be worth the hype? And I was pleasantly surprised by that book. I thought it was beautifully written. I thought it was poetic. I thought it was interesting from a historical perspective. And there were just so many levels in which I thought it was really a beautiful book, and I enjoyed it a lot. So remembering that, I had similar, I won't say fears. I'll just say that I had put this off because I wanted to read it when there was an opportunity to talk about it with people, because I follow a book club schedule. And I thought, okay, finally, I'm going to read this book. There's still, I think, 1,700 people on the wait list for it at Hennepin County Library. And again, I will say I enjoyed it. I understand why people are embracing this book. I think I wish we had more men here tonight, because I think there's a lot about the book that speaks to the female experience, and especially if you go back to the 60s, 70s, 80s, and so on. I enjoyed the dialogue. I loved how Evelyn said it reminded her a little bit of the Where'd You Go, Bernadette, because there's something about the breezy dialogue and the kind of quirky character and the way all of the sort of opinions and comments and so on just flow really nicely, just flow. And a lot of it is ideas and exasperation and frustrations and self-reflection and all that. But my gosh, I think that's a real skill that the author used in really having all of that kind of flow in the way that it did. I think I loved how things developed. I mean, there was a relationship there with Calvin, and all of a sudden there was a chapter pretty early on that said 30 minutes later he'd be dead, and you just go, whoa, so you realize there's more that's gonna go on in this book than what you might have thought, from the beginning. But what I will close in saying is that my daughter is a scientist, and she has just started reading the book. She's maybe about a quarter or third of the way through, and I saw her over Mother's Day, and she said, Mom, there's a lot that hasn't changed in the world of being a scientist and working in a male-dominated field. And anyway, so I'm so looking forward to more conversations with her about it, because I think that's kind of the charm of the book, in a way, is how this character navigated relationships with men, survived some pretty horrific things, but then kept moving forward, had a true love relationship that she wasn't going to make any sacrifices in terms of her profession, to move that, to affect that. She really stood her ground on some things, maybe regretfully, when she realized, he got killed. And so she never had that marriage. But then she had this amazing daughter, and there were so many parts that I chuckled and cheered. And anyway, I just think it's a very entertaining read. So I was glad to read it.
So Donna, with that long of a wait list at the library, how did you, what was your solution for getting yours in time?
I put it on the list probably about 6 months ago, and my copy came up, just in time. So I was all set to buy it. But great
tip. You guys, when I send out these lists, even if it's not officially confirmed, start reserving those, because the odds are, if it makes it to the list stage, there's a pretty good chance you might see it in the next year or so. Not everyone does, though. Some do, fall off with the voting and stuff like that. But it doesn't hurt to reserve. Of course, you can also use our bookshop, which I will share that link again. And Books and Bars does get a small percentage, and you can allocate other percentage to independent bookstores. But Donna, what I thought you were going to tell us was, as a librarian, I just can take whatever I want and go to the top of the list and make people wait, because I've heard of other places where they can do stuff like this.
No, you cannot, Jeff. It's an ethical issue.
Okay.
Here's the thing, at the library, you're supposed to, even if you want to check out a book, if you're working this as a librarian at the staff desk, you walk over to the public checkout and check it out yourself.
Yeah.
Through right.
Unlike me, when I worked at a record store, and I got fourth row for U2 at Camp Randall Stadium in Madison, because, well, I was the first one to get tickets, and then the guy in line was the next one to get tickets. Because I had to make sure it worked. You know, I had to make sure the Ticketmaster was working properly before I opened it up to the public that had been waiting overnight. So it makes sense. I don't know if you could do that anymore, but that's what you could do when I was in college. Good times. All right, I'm not seeing another hand right now. I've posed a couple of, oh, I see Joan. Joan's doing her actual hand. Joan, I'm gonna, can I ask you to unmute yourself? Or can you unmute?
Okay, can you hear
Yeah.
me now?
I can, yeah.
Okay.
Hi, Joan.
How interesting that you talked about Camp Randall. We were there yesterday. We were there over the weekend for our granddaughter's graduation.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I wanted to go back to the comment that Evelyn had mentioned when she said, have things changed, or what, or how are things today? We did this book 2 weeks ago for our book club. And two of the women in our book club, well, one of them is a professor at the University of Minnesota, and she has her own lab. She is a chemist, and she's been there for 30 years. And she said, let me tell you, that book is true. She said, I know of people, women, who have written papers and their superiors have taken it and published it under their own name and gotten the recognition for it. And that surprised me. Well, then one of the other women in our group has just retired. I think it's from UCare, and she was one of the top executives there. Had her picture in the paper all the time. So we asked her, you know, well, how was it when you were there? And she kind of laughed and she says, you know, that book is true. She said, I could walk into an executive meeting, and she said, I was invisible. I was the only woman there. So she said, it truly is still going on. I just thought you'd be interested in hearing that.
Yes, thank you, Joan.
Yeah.
And that is, I mean, I guess that's too bad, right? That's
Oh,
unfortunate
sure
to
is.
hear. And you know, I guess that's, you know, one of the things that she was trying to say here with this. And I'm interested, of course, in what else you guys thought. If there are other levels to this, if it is, you know, maybe sort of sneakily an easy read or a pleasant read, but that there's a little something more here, and maybe we have to look a little deeper. Anyone else have any thoughts, comments, want to tell us what they thought of it, or shout out their high school chemistry teacher or a professor that did a great job for them? Anyone, feel free. I see Rebecca. Hi, Rebecca.
I'm late. I'm sorry.
Welcome.
It was Donna's bad example last time that caused me no. I haven't heard most of the discussion, obviously, so I'm trying to catch up. But as far as male and female roles in the workplace, I think it's true, at least in my experience, that sometimes men don't even know that they're doing this. It is just so much an assumption that certain things are their privilege that they don't even, I mean, if you accuse them of doing something that you think is unfair, they don't even have the concept of it. It's like they've never discovered that as an option. So they don't even, I know that was true in mine. And it's so prevalent that you get, I don't know whether gaslit is the right term, but you start believing, well, I guess if nobody thinks this was wrong, then, you know, then it must not have been wrong. But I'm going to go on to more general topics. This book has probably been the most popular book amongst my friend group. And I think it's because it's that combination of feminine power, the talking dog, the, you know, all the, well, you know, it had a lot of very popular elements. Almost too much for me. I almost felt a little, okay, there's another thing that they're doing, there's another thing. But you know what? Sometimes it's nice to have uncomplicated books that, you know, give you all the things, and then you're just like, okay, I will definitely read more by her. Is this her first book? Is that correct?
This is the first published one. She wrote, she likes to talk about a novel that she wrote when she was 5, that is basically 3 sentences long, and then one that she wrote when she was 12. But then she wrote a 700-page novel that was her first, and got 98 rejections, and now realizes that a first-time author has a really tough time trying to get someone to read 700 pages and accept that. But there is now interest in that, even though she thinks it needs work and might tweak it, but she might go back and look at that one. But she is working on something else. This is her first big published one. Yes, she's worked in advertising quite a bit as a copywriter.
Maybe she overcorrected from the first one, which was not so popular, to things that we would know were popular. One other thing, I guess I have a comment about the relationship between her and her husband. It kept being described as perfect, and I did not think it was a perfect relationship. And I think she was better off without him, but that's perhaps my inaccurate take. But it just seemed like if he had remained on the page, it would have been a very different story, and she would not have had those same struggles to overcome, and it would have affected her daughter. Is that right? Gosh, it's been a while. This book, I guess I really enjoyed it, but it's kind of vapored in my mind. It's been over a month since I read it, so sometimes that happens. But anyway, I'll stop talking now.
Well, thanks, Rebecca. I did just posed some questions about Elizabeth and Calvin and their romance, and if they actually were a good fit and had true chemistry or not. She certainly seems, really affected by the loss of him throughout the rest of the book, and it really does seem as though she cared for him quite a bit, and her. Whether they were a good fit or not, I don't know. I do think that you have a really good point that her storyline and her character would not have grown in the same way, or it would not have happened unless this catalyst happened, unless the fact that she did lose Calvin, because that really put a lot of other things in motion. So I'm sure that was probably an early plan from the start, although the author has said she is not an outliner. In fact, if she starts to plot too much, she ends up erasing those things and making sure they don't happen. She talked about people wanting to know what the next book was about, and said she declines to say because she's already talked about it. And in the past interviews where she talked about it, like last year, she's changed all of that stuff. So now she feels like there's like lies that are out there, people expecting things that she's not going to live up to because she put them out there and then changed her mind. So I don't know, how much she knew from the start that Calvin and her would get together, and that Calvin would die and then leave Elizabeth on her own, or if that she comes to these things kind of, it seems like she kind of writes as she goes and wants to invent it and not have it all laid out. So I don't know. I see Donna's got her hand back up. Donna, talk to us.
Oh, okay. Just a couple of quick things. Bonnie Garmus is actually the first speaker at the Hennepin County Friends of the Library Pen Pals series for the next season, starting in the late summer, early fall, whatever. So I think it turns out it's kind of a coup in a way to get such a best-selling author to come to the Twin Cities and do that presentation. I thought Rebecca's comment about Calvin dying early on and how that affected the story is really an interesting one, because the fact that she then had to, she lost her job, and then, being unmarried and pregnant, and oh heavens, and so then she had to forge her way beyond that and have her daughter and be a single parent. And there were just so many interesting plot elements that grew out of that, in addition to, of course, the ending with the unmarried woman who gave birth to Calvin kind of figuring into the plot at the end, which was kind of a little bit neatly coincidentally tied up, but still kind of interesting in terms of parallels. I think that what I also thought was pretty cool is the many levels on which the title worked. I mean, I think the lessons in chemistry, in addition to, of course, her show, Supper at 6, where it was really a lot of lessons in chemistry that really ended up putting her on the map and giving her an audience and an opportunity to really have an amazing impact on what it turns out to be the aspirations of a lot of women in the audience, learning from her and getting inspired by her and so on. But all through, there were so many references to chemistry. And I've never been a person that was a big fan of chemistry, and biology, maybe physics, but chemistry, oh, the periodic table and all that. But it really gave me a whole new, I had lessons in chemistry from this book, because she talked about how it really was the basis of life and all this, original, and her whole research about what was the very first cell and how that all happened and the combinations. And when she learned how to row by reading, well, of course she read physics, but she said, oh, this is no big deal. I just learned she was such a scientist. She figured out how it was all about the, resistance to the boat and the strokes of the oar and how thick the paddle was and blah, blah, blah. She said, oh, sure enough, it worked. But and then the idea of chemistry between her and Calvin is even by the end, she's telling Calvin's biological mother, we had true chemistry with each other. And I think that was the kind of cool part about their relationship, that they spent their lunch periods talking about work. I mean, here are all these office gossips kind of sitting off to the side, trying to read into all of course they're going to do this or do that or this. Well, no, they're talking about work, which was their basis for connecting in many ways. So I think there was chemistry there. So anyway, I just thought that it was a cool title, I thought.
Yes, I really liked how she looked at cooking, as chemistry, and I liked how that because it's something we do here when we cook, and it's interesting, when well, why do these ingredients work together, and why do you have to do it a certain way? Well, there's the chemistry of it, and this is why, and I like that. I think that that you make me think that yes, it was a good relationship. I'm gonna go on record and say that I do think that her relationship with Calvin was good for her, and and it was a tragic loss for her. But of course, like we said, it doesn't. The book doesn't unfurl the same way for her if he doesn't die. I think that I'm really excited to see that Cindy figured out how to do her virtual hand, and that she's got her virtual hand up now. But Evelyn's hand was up first. So Evelyn, talk to us.
Hi. I realized that I forgot to talk about my high school chemistry teacher.
Please do.
His name was Mr. Roddy, and he was kind of boring, but I loved the class. I just I don't know. I was like maybe either a sophomore or junior in a class mostly with seniors, and I just loved like the class aspect of that class. But yeah, and then they end up being a chemistry minor. So
Wow.
I guess Mr. Rock was Rebecca, I feel like that was a good point that you made, this wondering between like Calvin and Elizabeth's relationship. Like it's to me, it was very interesting that, and of course, like if if Calvin had continued to live, maybe they would have opened up more to each other. But, the limited knowledge that they had about each other's backgrounds. And of course, like maybe part of it was like a plot, like a way to move the plot forward. But like they were very private about their backgrounds, and they didn't really know too much about each other's background. And in fact, later on, it seemed like Elizabeth learned more by reading Calvin's diaries and notes and those letters with Waverly than she learned about his past while he was alive. And then it just thought it strange that like she didn't really open up to him too much about herself, or everything she told him, she told to the um, journalist like in one afternoon. I just thought that was a little interesting. It was probably a way to move the plot forward, but like, what was it about this journalist that you're telling him everything about your history? But maybe, I don't know, maybe she had reached a breaking point at that point. But yeah, I thought that was also very interesting. Like,
Yeah, I would, at that point, that's kind of what I took it as too, is that she wanted to make sure that the proper aspect of the story was represented, and not, that the story wasn't, about her being pretty and this just being, TV and stuff like that in a cooking show, but that she had something else that she wanted to say. And so maybe that's why she was so like, yeah, here's, I'm going to lay it all out for you. And I want this to be, known and in print, sort of thing. That's made my take on it. But yeah, it could have been also a plot contrivance at this point to get it done.
But also, yeah, you're right. I mean, she had matured since then. That's a really good point. I mean, this is like, whatever, 7 years later. And she's lived a lot and seen a lot of these other women that she got to know through this show.
Yep.
And their lives. Yeah.
Cindy.
It was something that Donna said about the lessons in chemistry that made me think of the cookbook, Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody has either read that or seen there's a 4-part series on Netflix, but Samin Nosrat is a chef, and she really explains all the chemistry of cooking, with the, when to add salt, how it tenderizes the meat, how cooking something at a high temperature is different than, cooking it at a low temperature for a long time. So I highly recommend both the Netflix series, which is just a 1-hour segment on each of the topics. Plus I've been reading the book itself, and it has about 300 pages of her descriptions. And then it has about another 500 pages of recipes.
Wow. Have you tried them? Are you making stuff from the book?
No, I'm just virtually enjoying them.
Okay. Awesome. Lara, am I pronouncing right? Lara?
Lara, yes.
Lara,
Good.
how are you? Talk to us.
Good. This is my first time virtual, so I'll try to get this right. Hi guys.
Hi.
My icebreaker question, I didn't take chemistry, but my favorite teacher was my field biology teacher in high school, and he just recently retired, Mr. Weaver from Stillwater High School. So he was always a grand old time. We used to watch Ace Ventura during class, but it's a whole other issue. Okay, where do I begin with this? So I was looking all throughout the book because there's a scene with the dog 630 where I was just like, yep, I really like this dialogue with the dog. And it was the one where she said, "You're a very smart dog." And then she said, "Dolphins are smart, but cows aren't." And then he's going through this little dialogue of like, well, but cows are probably too smart to even answer you or do the tricks. And I thought that was hilarious because I'm a dog person. But that's where I was like, okay, this dog part is really, it's doing it for me. But it wasn't until then, there was this moment where it was like the first chapter started with the cooking show, and then it went to the Calvin story. And then that Calvin story happened. I'm just like, I thought this book was about a cooking show. So when is that going to happen? And then it didn't show up. And I'm just like, okay, I'm waiting for it. When is it going to happen? So that anticipation was kind of making me kind of not be into it until I got to that dog park. And I'm like, okay, I can get into this for the dog. And then the cooking part happened, and I was rewoven back into it. My other point was when we were talking about the compatibility or the chemistry between her and Calvin, I was thinking of that episode that she taught where she was talking about the bonds, the coalescent bond and all the other ones. And I was trying to pinpoint which one she thought she was with Calvin. And I can't remember which exact bond that she was talking about because I can't find it in the book, but that would have been interesting to think of, like, as she was doing that episode on the show, was she thinking about her relationship internally while she was saying all that stuff? So that's all I have to say.
Yeah, was it a covalent bond? Was that the bond?
Probably. I don't know
I-
chemistry, so.
If anyone knows the exact bond, please jump in. Beth Black, you did it. You made it
Yes,
in.
finally, we entered through Google after several failed attempts at Zoom. So sorry to be late. I had one comment. I had this book in the doctor's office, and she's like, "Oh, I love that book." Because really, this is so widely read. And then she's like, there's a real live person on Instagram that does cooking with science. And so I started following her. It's Sugarology 101. And she has a PhD in biochem and molecular biology. And she does more baking. I'll put the address in the chat, but I thought that was kind of a cool connector that, I always think, oh, I'm not going to like this popular book. And then I read it and I'm like, oh, I love it. I am just like the masses, but it was wonderful. This also reminded me of my husband's aunt and uncle were both physics professors at UW-Madison. And I pictured them as, because they, were doing science in the early 60s. Bruce's aunt especially, and she was like a went to Radcliffe when she was 16, and her husband, Bruce's uncle, went to Yale and he was a rower. So I just saw so many parallels. So it was really fun. And tragically, she just died of Alzheimer's last February. And I was like, oh, I'd love to chat about this book with her. And this is my friend Sue, and she's a very well-read person.
I don't know about that. I don't know. We missed the beginning, but I don't know if we're just sharing observations or.
Yeah, go for it. Whatever you got.
Question. Oh, I was gonna say I love the book from multiple perspectives. I actually was a chemistry major until my senior year when I changed it. But I remember being the only woman in my physics class in high school. I remember being one of the only women in the chemistry classes. So I just and then just as a professional woman, some of the obstacles that you faced, I could relate to some of what was going on in the book. But I loved her strength. I loved I loved all the characters, so it was great. But I guess I would just ask anybody else if they have a favorite element on the periodic table.
Ooh, that's a good
What's
icebreaker.
yours?
That's
Oh
a
my
good one. Yeah. Why don't you give us an example? Why don't you start?
Oh, there's so many of them, but I hydrogen is very it's plug and play. It can do so many different things. So hydrogen's always a good one, but then you always have those unique ones that you can't even remember. That nobody's heard of. So
Okay, I love it.
Let's see
Feel
what
free to, if anyone's got one, tell us. I like that hydrogen is plug and play. That's a great way to describe it. Well, thank you guys. I'm glad you finally got in, whether it was, however you had to. I saw that you were in audio wise before, and then your picture came up. So I don't know. I mean,
you're saying something that we shouldn't have wondered about.
No, I didn't. No, we weren't hearing you. I just saw that you were connected. I knew that you were in, and then all of a sudden your video came on. So, and I saw the messages that you were having a hard time getting in, and I was trying to send you stuff, but I got someone else in Arizona who was not able to get in, but I can't help her at this point. Our bond is not covalent enough, if you will. Anyone got any other periodic table of element jokes or anything else they want to share? How about some of the supporting characters? What did you think of the writing style? What did you think of, we talked a bit about how it maybe is deceptively simple. Any other thoughts on it? Rebecca?
Just that I really enjoyed the woman who lived across the street. I think she was a problematic person in some ways because, you know, I don't know that she always chose the best things, but I loved that there was growth and that Elizabeth was willing to put up with her through all the hard parts. And also it's again, it goes back to chemistry. You know, she was a necessary element to be added to the family of Elizabeth and the daughter. And the if you think about it that way, which you guys have all probably already expressed, Elizabeth was maybe a hydrogen element and attracted people and was able to create the connections that were needed, even when she was split off from what is hydrogen's most wanted, what would it bond with first? H2O, Beth, or?
Oxygen,
Yeah,
right?
oxygen.
Yeah.
Right. So if Calvin was her oxygen, you know, that bond was so strong, and what happens when that gets broken, you know, she found some other elements to play with. So I'm quite liking this metaphor, so I'll stop here.
All right. Lara.
Laura. I Miss Frask. I did not, even though she had good intentions at the end, I still did not care for that woman.
Yeah.
I don't know, like she had good intentions at the end, but then the entire like thread throughout the entire thing was that she was just kind of a petty woman, and I didn't like it. Made me feel bad, but that's all I have to say.
You felt bad for not liking her, or she made you feel bad as a character?
What she did to Elizabeth made me feel bad, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. Donna.
So like women on not supporting women, that Frask, which was a true contrast to Harriet, the neighbor, she was such a wonderful character and really like saved Elizabeth's life. I feel like she was like a lifesaver and taught her how to nurture and take care of her daughter. And that was so, but they did it so wonderfully through friendship, not this petty women on women kind of that was illustrated by Frask. I agree. Like I couldn't stand that HR person.
Right.
Donna.
Well, and just about that HR person, I think there was early on where she was doing all this undermining. And I think that even Elizabeth said that she was the kind of person that, and I'm sure this exists, where these misguided women that think by supporting the men in their misguided attitudes, it will elevate them in the eyes of these men that are kind of running the show. And boy, that really is a tough situation and very despicable, but it's true. At the end, she kind of came around with some things. And I really agree about Harriet. I think she was just a breath of fresh air and so much what was needed to help Elizabeth and her daughter navigate all the things they had to do. But in terms of supporting characters, I was glad, in spite of all the despicable men, I was glad there were some pretty decent men. I mean, I think that the doctor that was a rower and ended up being her obstetrician, I think he really had kind of an appreciation, maybe because he helped all these women through childbirth and all of this. He had some respect for women and appreciation for just all the stuff that women do that I think was pretty genuine and kind of refreshing. And I liked the relationship she developed with the TV producer. who she realized they were kind of kindred spirits, even though, they didn't have much in common, but there was a scene where she referred to him as kin, and it was like, oh yeah, he had been kind of misjudged by that teacher at the school, and who had some kind of stereotypical reactions to what she thought he was or wasn't as a dad. And so they had that in common, that kind of feeling like they were both being misjudged. And she says at one point, maybe that was the only thing they had in common, but it was kind of enough. They were friends. I mean, they actually had a pretty good relationship. So I think that there were a couple of men that I think were kind of redeeming men as a set of characters in the thing. And, getting back to Calvin, one thing that did bother me, and this kind of gets back to what Rebecca was saying, is even in the conversation that he had with Elizabeth, where he was thinking he was going to propose, or maybe it was after that, I can't remember where it was, that it was clear that he was kind of thinking that she would take his name. And he was kind of assuming that, they would do these things together, but his name would be first. I mean, it wasn't like he was totally pure on this whole idea of accepting her as a unique person. I think they did have chemistry, and I think they respected each other, but I think, he wasn't perfect either, but so maybe it's still okay that he died, and then she forged on.
Thanks, Donna. Rebecca.
Sorry, I forgot to take my hand down from last time,
Oh,
but I'm laughing at
okay.
you, Donna, because I agree that if Calvin had stuck around, there would have been a lot of revelations of his. He was a male, even though he was so genius and all that kind of stuff. He was going to get all of the glory, and she didn't get the glory even when she, when it was obvious that it was her work. So I'm not going to say anything more at this point. I'll take my hand down. Oh, you can. Thank you.
It's down. It's down. Any thoughts on what about the reveal that Calvin's real life mother is the one behind the funding of the scientific research for Elizabeth? Did that surprise you? Did that change your thoughts on anything? What do you imagine moving forward? I feel like there's sort of a found family aspect to this now, that even though she lost Calvin, maybe, she has a mother-in-law, and Maddie will have a grandmother. Evelyn.
I was genuinely surprised. I thought that Winston was the real father or whatever. And I also thought maybe he had something. I also thought Waverly was not a real person, and that Winston had made this fake relationship PayPal situation with Calvin to get to know his son better. That was my whole thing. I don't know if anyone else followed that trajectory of the story. So I was genuinely surprised. So that was good. So
I think I think it makes it stronger ultimately,
yes.
That it ends up being Calvin's mom, that it isn't, a male or some father figure who's in this, but it's actually, another sort of strong woman, especially for that time. It's kind of a surprise in that sense, but it makes sense for this story then, that shows that, Elizabeth doesn't need the help from any man to achieve what she's done here, and, ends up being, like I said, that's a family of women then at the end.
Yeah.
But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Really, no, that's really cool. Unfortunately, Ms. Parker, she still has to have all of her money doled out by the executor, the lawyer.
Yeah.
But he was one of the good guys, so that's good. Just like Rebecca was pointing out, or I'm sorry, Donna was pointing out. Well, there were a lot of good guys in this book. But yeah, I was generally surprised. That was I definitely thought it was going to go a different way. So that was good. That was kind of fun at the end.
Jeff, I was just gonna mention, you talk about the strength of women, how was this?
Yeah.
Women stuff. I loved also the piece in the book about the physical strength of Elizabeth and her rowing. And sorry,
Right.
we can late, so if you guys already talked about this, stop me. But
No.
I mean, that's like an incredibly intense sport. And for her to be strong at that too and sort of show that physical strength, I like that part of the book.
Yeah, it's good they have Captain Marvel playing her in Apple TV Plus because Brie Larson's strong, so it'll be good. She'll be believable as a rower.
This has not been made into a movie yet, but it's
It's already been shot. They're maybe doing some editing, but it'll be out this year on Apple TV Plus. It'll be a limited series. So it'll be longer than a movie, but probably only one season, I would imagine, that tells the whole story, maybe over 8 episodes or so. And it stars Brie Larson. Yeah.
Oh, no, they jumped on that as fast as it, that book took off, and, whomever got to her first to get the rights, they knew. I mean, it has got so many elements.
Yeah.
It's up for, bakes a perfect, dessert.
Yeah, she had 3/4 of the book done, and there was a big bidding war before it was, even completed, just based on what people had read that far. There was a huge bidding war for this book, so good for her. And I look forward to see what she writes next. Joan?
I have not figured out where this hand
okay.
is that I'm supposed to be clicking on to. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
To go back to your question about
Yeah.
what were our thoughts on when we discovered that Mrs. Parker was his
Yeah.
mother, that surprised me because I was really into the book and enjoying it until just near the very end. And I thought, all of these things are coming together and being resolved so beautifully as to who's related to who and why all these characters are fitting in. And I almost felt like I was watching a Hallmark movie, because it was so perfect and it was all wrapped in beautiful wrapping with a nice bow at the end of it. So it'll be a perfect thing for television, I think.
Yep, I'm sure it'll look great. In fact, I'm putting a link here so you can see what Brie Larson looks like on the set of Supper at 6, and also there's a brief little behind the scenes first look at it too. So watch that at your leisure, or you can watch it right now. But just turn the volume down so it doesn't ruin the discussion. What else haven't we discussed yet about this one? Anyone else want to pop their any hand up that they can find is fine. Otherwise, we can ask more of the questions that I have. I was wondering if I see Evelyn's hand. How are you, Evelyn?
I just want one more
Yeah.
thing. I just wanted to say my least favorite character was the first grade kindergarten teacher. She was absolutely horrific. And I loved that. I loved how horrible she was, right? And how judgmental she was. And my housemate is a first grade teacher, and just imagining that happening in her first grade class is just it was so bad. But yeah, she but really she was a great foil because she really showed the expectations of that time for parenting and children. And I really hope that for kindergarten teachers didn't yell at their classrooms as much as she did. But yeah, I thought it was perfect in terms of she was the perfect evil kind of comedy a little bit, although she caused a lot of trouble for Walter and Elizabeth and their children. Yeah.
Anyone else have anything on the other characters or what we think?
I have one thought about the part that I was most surprised about was really that sexual assault that happened to Elizabeth. And I've gone over it again and again in my head, and I've thought, like, was that gratuitous? Like, was that important to the, I mean, it was so horrifically written. Like, I feel I like did an audible gasp. And I do think it was an integral part, and it didn't seem extra, but it almost needed like a warning. Like it was really horrible.
Yeah, I mentioned, we did talk about it a little bit up top. I just mentioned, that for the rest of the tone of the book, it is that is a pretty dark and tough chapter to read. Yeah, and I don't know if if in places there have been trigger warnings, on this for people ahead of time. I was surprised by it, but I did not know what to expect from this. And we talked a bit before about how you might have been waiting for the cooking show part of it to start, things you had heard about or other things, but not knowing maybe that it would get as bad and dark for this character in that scene. That was tough. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know if it was something that we felt if that also didn't happen, if this character wouldn't have become quite the character that she was. And so this part of what her stealing resolve was also just to show, like, maybe really to emphasize how bad it was for a woman in the early 50s, especially trying to work in that field. And maybe that was just a way of adding on, like, it could even get that bad. And I'm sure that it's not something, I'm sure things like this had happened and do in workplaces. So yeah, sorry, that was shocking.
What was it that they put on her, made her lab coat? Liz, do you remember, Laura? It was
Easy.
Oh, that's
Oh
right.
yeah, easy. Yeah.
I could just see the men going, and she never reacted to it. So either she didn't get it or she rose above. But that was, for me, that was like, these people are hopeless.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Donna?
Well, just speaking about some of the minor characters, not even a character, but I know that we all kind of notice different things based on our own personal lens, but it seems like we've had kind of a string of books where there's been a positive librarian person. And there was a page, I think it was on page 231, where there was one of the notes that Elizabeth puts in Madeline's lunchbox. And the lunchbox note said, "The librarian is the most important educator in the school."
Oh, you're loving
I
it.
just thought,
Yeah.
okay, there's kind of those little side comments that some of us notice, maybe more than others, but I think it was a good one.
It is good. And Donna, now you got me thinking, I'm going to be looking for books with negative
Evil
librarian
librarian.
characters. Yeah, I want evil librarian characters to balance it out, because it's not fair. Although I have a new theory, and I never thought about this before, but if you're an author, especially a first-time author, smart move is to have really good librarians in your book and also really good booksellers. That would make those like positive characters, because then you can just imagine a bookseller being like, what, I'm gonna get someone else to read this, so they know how hard it is to be a bookseller and how good we are. And I can see that smart move is do a Thelma and Louise style story that it's a bookseller and a librarian. And at first they don't get along because the bookseller's like, you should buy the book. And the librarian's like, no, you should get the book for free. And let me loan it to you. You only have to wait for 1,700 other people to get it. And then you can have it. And the bookseller's like, you can support a small business by buying the book, and then they go on a road trip together, but they're just two lovable characters. And guess what? That's a #1 bestseller book. You heard it here first. Who wants to help me write it? Or at least help me do the Apple TV Plus show. Let's do it. All right. Do we have another hand? Laura, was your hand up still or no? It was up and then down. I don't know. You jump in, talk to me.
It was, not to bring us back to the scene, the bad scene. But I almost wondered if, because Beth, you made the comment that it like shocked you because it came out of the blue and whatever. But I almost wondered if Bonnie meant it that way because it came out of the blue to her, that her in the book. Like, wow, that's just happened to me. And now this is just happening. And now I have to go through with this and make a choice and make a decision to react to this. So I don't want to read too into things if the author didn't mean to do it, but it also made me think, well, what if that was the reaction that she wanted to elicit from it? I also thought Dr. Donati would be the person to do it too. And he was just a sour character and he had other ulterior motives, but like it actually happened to be Lebensbull, whatever the producer's name. So yeah, it was tough to read, but, or, it was two people, honestly, one who did and one who tried. And the second time she was almost prepared. And she was like, not this time. Like, I have this knife. Like, you're not going to go through with it. So, I don't know. It was dark.
Yeah. It was. Anyone else on that, or anyone else on what we think Bonnie Garmus was trying to say with this book? What was your takeaway from it, whether the author meant it or not? What's going to be something that you think about, remember this book, why you might recommend it to someone?
Talking dogs, definitely.
Talking dogs?
Or at least, dogs with thoughts.
Yeah.
Yeah. And cows too. I'm inclusive of the cows as well.
I'm looking at this other book as possibly doing that. Another member had recommended called Perestroika in Paris. And I believe it's from like the point of view of a dog, a racehorse, and another animal. And I can't remember now what's on the cover, but that, if you guys like thinking dogs, maybe I have another one for you. I won't recommend Old Yeller then. That book affected me as a child. That was a rough one. So anyone else on what they got from this or what they think Bonnie Garmus wanted us to take away, or anything else you want to hear the group discuss? Questions you had? Feel free to. Does anyone want to join us in person on Thursday at Urban Growler? You're all invited. If you'd like to, hopefully there will be some other men there. Then you can ask them questions directly about what they thought about this and how they had to deal with it. So I don't have to just represent all of them. I'm sorry that there aren't any others in this night. I'm not sorry about who's here. I'm very happy to have all of you and your wonderful perspectives on this book tonight. And hopefully we will continue to have a good turnout for our summer books. If you didn't see them again, I will post that list in here with our schedule. Anyone else have any other questions about, especially anyone who's doing this for the first time, want to know if they're interested in coming back or want more information? Let me know.
I'm
Rebecca.
gonna jump in. Yeah. I'm not going to wait for you to call on me. Back to the idea of rape and introducing it into a novel to show the inequity and the sympathy for the character and all that. I mean, it's a very strong plot device or element, and you have to use it in a way that doesn't end up, teaching the wrong lesson. I'm not saying that anyone would think that Elizabeth was responsible for it, but I think we might have thought that Elizabeth should have been smarter and not gotten into that situation. And I just happened to be, as we do on the internet, watch something, and it was an Irish girl, beautiful accent, and it was a long form poem, and it was women need to be taught to not I don't know, to be careful or whatever. Anyway, and over the course of the poem, she points out that none of that is the women's fault. It's men who need to be taught not to be aggressors, and that men don't own women's bodies and their reactions. And the emphasis on how beautiful Elizabeth was, you know, how perfect, how her body was such a machine, and how all that, I think, in a way, and I don't want to go too far into this, but in a way was saying, well, you know, there you go. If you're beautiful and smart, you're going to have, you know, something bad happen to you. And, you know, let this be a lesson to you. And I think for so long that's what women have had to deal with, you know, that if we are, even if we are doing all the right things, we are still going to be vulnerable or victims. And I thought it was interesting how Elizabeth rarely referenced that her emotional journey really didn't have a huge blip from that. Either it's because she's more evolved than I think most women are, or I don't know, maybe Bonnie Garmus didn't want to go there, but I did think that was one element that I'm very suspicious when people put their characters into a place of vulnerability and potential you know, damage and all that as a plot device, I guess. And I'm not saying it wasn't effective, and I think that's part of the reason why this book is so popular, because it is very we survived kind of all the shit that happened to us, but we may end up reinforcing the same things that have been going on for, you know, hundreds of years. Anyway.
Good points. Yeah, and definitely worth thinking about. I think, you know, obviously partially why she's written to be so beautiful and striking is, you know, I don't know which idea came first, but this is how it's just like you have a TV show, you know what I mean? Like that's all the guy can see at first is like, she would look great on TV, you know what I mean? Like she, you know, even though I don't even understand what she's saying, and then they don't even like a lot of the times what she's saying, but she was, you know, beautiful, easy on the eyes, you know, so it was like, well, we can put her on TV and we'll make something work. Yeah, it's I'm not saying I don't know for a fact that, you know, this is the only reason, you know, why Bonnie Garmus put that scene in there, and why this, you know, why Elizabeth Zott was the victim of a sexual assault. If it was just, you know, to move the plot, or if it's, you know, there's something else there, but you know, it definitely stands out as apart from many of the other tonality, you know, the tone of the rest of the book for the most part. But you know, and does she really process it? I don't know. This goes back to one of my first things I put in the chat was maybe partially the audiobook version of it, but I know that Sue saw my point on this. She seemed a little bit on the spectrum to me, the way the character was written, just the way she didn't seem to be, you know, she was very like, her emotions were so in check, you know, that it was just all about, she was so focused and so on the work. It just reminded me of, you know, maybe someone who, you know, is like a genius, but, you know, maybe socially, you know, they're not completely there. I don't know.
I was about to
Laura?
say,
Yeah.
she,
Go ahead.
I had a different view, but it could have been the same view as like on the spectrum. But I just thought she was very analytical, and maybe she saw that experience and she took it in and she just filed it away as something that happened, and she needs to, you know, file it away for another future analysis that she has to add into another equation that she has to do any of that for. So, and that's how she was able to, with the producer, do what she did, because she's like, okay, I understood what happened last time. I'm using that knowledge to do this time to elicit this change. And I saw it as her just taking it all in, and yeah.
I like it. Sue?
I'm laughing because I thought you meant that comment on the spectrum about Calvin. So I was agreeing that Calvin was.
Okay.
But Elizabeth could be too. But I think with Elizabeth, it was more, I just thought of it now, but similar to the woman who wrote Educated, where
Mhm.
I think Elizabeth had such a weird family dynamic that I think her social development
Yeah.
was just off.
Okay.
And it took her a while to have friendships and figure that out.
Yep.
So I'm not sure with her, or Calvin, I think probably was.
Okay. Glad you clarified that one for me.
Yeah.
Donna.
Oh, just a comment about the rape scene and Evelyn's comment in the comments in the chat about that pencil. You know, I think that's a really perceptive comment that number 2 pencil was always with her. I mean, she always had it as part of her hairdo and so on, would twist her hair up and put the pencil in. It's in the, on the cover of the book and all of that. And I think it was, and Evelyn's comment was, it was a constant reminder that she never forgot. And I think that there were references to the pencil and they kind of harken back to that scene. And I think that was just an interesting little piece of how the author portrayed Elizabeth, and it became a little part of her character, was that pencil. And, I think some of us who have our own fetishes about pencils, I think kind of notice those things when we read about a character having a pencil as one of their plot devices and life tools.
She's a good librarian, but she's got a bit of a pencil fetish. I mean, if you can get past that.
I do.
All right. All right. Well, everyone's got something. Good to know. All right. So June 21st, Sea of Tranquility at Sociable Cider Works, or June 27th at Urban Growler, depending on if you prefer Wednesdays or Tuesdays. You get them both with Books and Bars summer schedule. Sea of Tranquility by